stone here. I was going to try something different. I felt eureka moment, and so I thought I would do, and this is going to be hilarious, a director's commentary of one of my cooking videos, because I find when it comes to what I talk about, which is sexual strategy within a relationship for the most part, but also, you know, from a single perspective, because I was single slaying it, doing pickup like a lot of the guys in the space there. A bit out of the game, but the game hasn't changed too much. And I know when I talk about subtext, a lot of people are confused on what that means. And I thought a great corollary with dealing with subtext in a sexual perspective is on the little lies that you tell when putting together a YouTube video like this. And I thought it was a great way to show subtext in a way that's relatable, that people can then take and understand the concept and map it to their own lives. So in this case, I'm doing one on my video for Swiss melts. So there's going to be some situations where I have some technical errors on this thing because obviously I'm not a pro filmmaker. I'll go over those at that point, as well as give you some little insight in how one of these things are put together. They usually take about a forenoon to make. And while a lot of the video is copying over, I tend to do most of the script. The funny thing about videos is when you're doing scripts on these things is that there's only maybe 1,300 words. It's not a lot, of which half of that is talking about the food you're making. And so only 500-600 words, which is maybe 4 minutes of spoken word content is there. But we'll get to that later because there's a nice little dry spell in the later on part where we're doing some time lapses. On a video, you have the first 15 seconds supposedly to catch people's attention. So in this case, what's the most important things I want you to know? That is the title of the video, the person who puts it together, and in this case, the dog, because obviously me talking about the Greyhounds a lot is kind of one of the big things in the brand. Oh, I don't think that renders quite properly when I have the window over there. What I should have done here, and what I usually do, is something called cutting on action. So you see, as this dog jumps, I would usually skip then to talk about the next thing. But I try to do something new here, which if you notice there is where it's a hidden cut. Pause this quickly. A hidden cut is where the cut is obfuscated by something you're doing. It's a misdirection kind of technique. And that's why people say in filmmaking, editing are the little lies. And your eye doesn't notice a difference. Obviously, I can't pick up a blanket, take it across, and then be sitting in the same chair wearing different clothes. So there's the lie. And this is kind of like when you're talking about game, how you kind of have to lie, but it's in an obvious way so people understand it's a lie and so they can kind of enjoy it themselves. And that's the whole point of game. So when you're telling the story here, this one was fairly easy. I'm just sitting there watching the baseball game from in my building, and I decided to go and make a sandwich for it. I thought tuna melt, baseball game. It's a nice little combination of food because for a lot of my cooking stuff, I don't know what I'm going to cook until that morning. And in this case, it seemed like a fairly easy choice because making a hot dog's not going to make for an interesting video. At least a tuna melt is something new. In this case here, so principles that I've been told of for good writing are say what you're going to say what you're saying, and then say what you just said. So in this case, it's putting everything together. This is the stuff that we're going to make, and this is what we're going to do. This part here, you would never know it to look at it, but this is two separate things filmed about half an hour apart. The idea here is you're giving somebody, you want to show what's important and what you want the person to focus on. I really don't care about you staring at me wearing a white Henley. I want to see you staring at the cooking process here, in which is the case. You see how I hold my hands for the cutting, how we're cutting pickles. And then I'm talking to you on the background like it's B-reel, as if we're doing something about it. The whole point here is it wants to be casual, like a conversation. I absolutely hate when I watch YouTube videos and it's just some guy preaching with B-reel footage of a video game. I think that's a very unattractive display. And then the subtext here is you're doing basic adulting things while having a conversation with the buddy, watching a baseball game. It simulates the idea of you just red pilling your friends, talking about hypergamy or whatever. But at the same time, you're paying attention to what's going on. Because I mean, at the end of this, I want you to be able to actually do something useful with this content, even if the sexual strategy part may not apply to you. It may not be your cup of tea. At least now you're going to be able to make a tuna melt. So there's like two types of value for it here. Plus the fact that being able to throw some sandwiches on a thing together. I'm going to go back to that actually, because there's something before I get to it. This one is called a cut on action. And I absolutely love it. What I would have done here is something else where they call it a, what is it? A jump cut? No. Oh yeah, cutaway. So if you'll notice here, the cut's on the action. I'm lifting up the piece of bread. Here I'm putting it on. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in between, but you don't need it for the story. What you can also do is have the camera do like a pan and do a hidden cut on there as well. Think of the camera the way you would think of a set of eyes. So that's your perspective. The camera is you. And so when you do a panning shot very quickly and then from a different shot from there, it's as if you're in the kitchen, working on the counter, then going in. It makes you more immersed. And the thing is, when you're immersed, you tend to be more receptive to the things you're talking about. So it's a very subtle thing that I try to do here where I want you guys to understand what a main event is. But if I just tell you, you're going to listen, say that's good, forget half of it. If you don't believe me, ask somebody who tells you got to watch this Jordan Peterson video if they can sum it up. They probably can't. The idea with this is to help with retention a little bit better and make you feel like you're actually in the room with me. Now, there's 10 minutes of talking and the sandwich only takes 5 minutes to make. So for a lot of it, you really have to create a lot of either time lapse or features like that. There we have another cutting on action. Lifting up the pan and showing the thing here as well as the plate. It's a very similar scene, both round objects, both where you're doing the cooking from. And it just seems natural, even though you're on the completely far side of the kitchen, different colored object. Zoomed right in, so you're not staring at me, you're paying attention to what you're doing. Like I said, it's the subtext of all these things, the little lies that you tell that are in between, or all the words in between the line. They can actually tell a more powerful message than the video itself. Because, I mean, I can make a sandwich, just do it with a single medium shot camera, and all you're going to get from it is you're going to watch me goofing around. You're going to think, who the hell is this guy? And why do I care that he's making a, let's face it, it's a 6 out of 10 chef's quality sandwich. It's not 10 out of 10. And that's never been the point of this anyway. There's another subtle thing that I add to these videos that I really do like. Technical issues aside, in this case here, it's because I had the type of tripod I had wasn't the most stable. And so you can only fix so much of the wobbling in post. But the idea is you're not trying to be a 10 out of 10 Chad, get the 10 out of 10 Stacy's, and live your life as if you're the millionaire playboy. This is 7 out of 10 concepts here. This is for the average guy who wants to be good enough that he has his choice of the litter, but not so good that it's unattainable. Here's where I'm going to do those hidden cuts on action. So right there, now I'm going to skip back. What are we on here? 4 minutes, 47 seconds. Let's see if I can get to the first part where we do a nice medium shot of the kitchen. So this gives you an idea of where everything is situated. So when I do that cut from the cutting board to the oven, I'll go back and, oh, there it was. When I go back from the cutting board to the oven, you already kind of know in your head where things are. That's a big mistake people make when filming, is they don't orient you to the space. Pause it here. So they don't orient you to the space. So you know when I make a jump cut, it's going from that pan that's behind us to this cutting board in front of us. In your mind, if I didn't have this initial medium angle shot in there, if I didn't set the stage, and this is like the equivalent of when you're running game, you're doing an opener, you're building rapport. If you don't do these first steps, everything else afterwards seems confusing. And I find with game, a lot of guys make this mistake where they just assume the other person's on the same page. They forget to set the stage and everything else is kind of awkward afterwards. So try to remember that the other person has a point of view that's not yours. Let's get back to where I left off here. So now when you see this shot, you know automatically you're sitting in the kitchen, you're facing the stove, you flip around, and you're right on the cutting board afterwards. And it all makes sense to you, but you don't really pay attention to it. It only seems confusing when it doesn't make sense. And again here, sticking with the close shots, you already kind of know where everything is, so I want to focus on my spoken word here, which I'm talking about the main event, which is a very difficult concept for a lot of guys to handle, as well as the food itself. Again, it's a masculine way of communication anyway. If you've noticed, I'm sure you've heard it. Ian Ironwood talks about it in the Male Social Matrix. Guys have a harder time looking at each other over appies and talking. It's a female thing. I can't really explain it. It has to do with guys hunting and girls gathering, whatever. Thing to take away from it is that guys need to be doing something while they're talking and absorb information passively. In that way, it's actually and this is going to be hilarious to say, but a masculine way of making a damn sandwich and talking to other guys. So now you're kind of seeing how the thought process goes behind these videos. There's actually more to it than you think, which is kind of neat. So I like to brag about it. Another thing I do here, they're called J cuts and L cuts. And that's where my voiceover is always over top of these things. So for some of these cuts, like that one there, it's a very disparate cut. I mean, there's not similar action. There's not a similar location. You're actually doing a very, what do they call that one? Cross cut, jump cut, fade cut, smash cut. It's very abrupt. Now, normally what this would do is create a change of tone. So if I was talking about the main event earlier and then right now I switch to a personal story, it would kind of switch the tone, and that'd be a great place to do it. In this case, what I do instead, so we don't get that abrupt tone change, is I do something called a J cut, also an L cut. And that just means the audio from the first cut carries over into the second cut, or the vice versa. Yeah, where the audio cuts in advance of the news scene. In this case, it's going to be an L cut. So I talk, the cut happens, I continue, and I finish that sentence. That helps your mind not have an abrupt change of pace when you switch from these different tonal styles. By the way, it's hilarious that over a 10-minute video where I make a sandwich, I can talk at length about it, but I find these are very interesting concepts. And if you can kind of build a lot of these mental models in your head, it's going to make you far better at game. This is where you see guys like Russell Brand tell these amazing stories where he kind of runs off on a tangent and still comes back. It's the same thing. You realize the subtext of what you're talking about carries all these disparate things together. And that one there, it's just a dissolve cut. And that's just to show the passage of time. Now, this is a technical error that I did here. And this is because I had the camera facing the wrong way. I didn't have time to fix it. I didn't check it like I should have. Lessons learned. The camera should be up higher. What it should have done there is shown the before and after. You get to see how the cheese goldens up and how it looks like it goes from an unappetizing half-finished sandwich to an actual finished thing. Another thing you could do here is where you make it like a surprise reveal, and me pulling the tray open would have done that. I could have gone with either of those choices. This is one of those things that you just kind of have to learn as you go. I've done, I don't know how many of these things now, 10, 20. So I'm getting better at it. But just be aware, if you decide to put your hat in the ring and create content, that these are the kind of things that are going to happen. Again there, another L cut. The voice goes over. The cut's very abrupt. We switch from the medium shot to reorient you to everything, and then the close-up shot to show you the final preparation. Pretty straightforward. It's the same concepts you've already seen a bunch now. I believe. Yeah, see there, another one. What I would have done there is a cut on action where the plate would have gone from here, gone from the cutting board, and I'd lift it up, and then as soon as the plate goes out of frame, have a shot here where I'm putting the plate down. So even though it's me essentially teleporting from behind the kitchen to on my dining room table, your brain sees it as one seamless maneuver. Now, I could say I'm doing an L cut there, but no, that's just a technical error, and that's the kind of thing that comes with experience. If you'll notice here, I stare off frame. The idea for this is it builds a little bit of curiosity as to what I'm looking at. Now, this dissolve cut here, again, it shows the passage of time. So, oh, that's what I've been staring at. They're opening up the dome. They're showing a baseball game. These time-lapse shots are generally very boring. There's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of cuts. At this point, I want you to focus mostly on the text. But at the same time, if I just skip to this shot right here, it makes no sense. Where is this dome? Why is it there? When you stare off like that and then do the dissolve, you're establishing A, that I'm looking at something off in the corner, pique your interest a little bit, and then the dissolve shows that it's, a change of pace, a change of perspective. Now you're looking through my eyes onto the outside. And again, I'm going to skip past this. A lot of this, and I hate to say it, I had a problem where I had not enough footage on videos to fill, and I try to keep the content at about a 10-minute level of resolution. YouTube seems to prioritize that, so that's what I'm going with. I could probably talk for 45 minutes on a main event, but that would be an entirely different style of filming, an entirely different set of cuts. Another technical issue. When I film these time lapses, it takes about 45 minutes or however long it takes. My older tripod, which I've since repaired and replaced, it had a lot of wobbling in the middle there because one of the dogs had tripped over the cord. Couldn't fix it in post, so I'm like, all right, how do I switch to a half open dome to a 3/4 length open dome? And that's the same thing. It's a dissolve cut, as if it's the passage of time. We were eating the sandwich, we were hanging out. Time passes on. Skipping past here then, because there's really not much more to say other than it finishes. Oh, there we go. So these ones here, I have them fade in and I fade the background down. It's a technical issue right there because so these backgrounds initially were always on my living room or the sky, whatever. White background, colored text works very well. This one here, I'm like, oh, I'll have white text now over a white background. So I went with the easy thing, just put some shadows on there. It just looked too washed out and it was too hard to read. I used to be a graphic designer and I did a lot of typesetting. So I already knew if I make this text hard to read, nobody's going to read it. And it's there for two reasons. One, I like giving a little bit of nuance to this. It's something you can't do because most of you have probably seen me from Twitter where you can't do a lot of nuance with 280 characters. In this case, I'm talking about the main event, and a lot of girls, a lot of white knights, and a lot of what we call purple-pilled people, or not purple, but blue. People who essentially don't frame relationships and sexual strategy the way we do, and they do it in a more female-centric way. They always assume the worst. Oh, you're doing dread, and you're going to reach a main event, you're manipulating a girl, you're causing anxiety, it's unattractive, and you're hurting the women. And at first, you kind of want to argue with it, realizing, oh, maybe if they just understood the point, if I articulated a bit better, then maybe they would get it. But it's not the case. They're just looking to shovel a bunch of crap your way. And if it wasn't that, it'd be something else. So part of this is to give a little bit of that nuance, kind of a tip of the hat to people who may not frame it in the correct way. So, okay, oh, I'm describing outcomes. I'm not, telling you the future. None of this is a guarantee. For the main event in specific, it's not a guarantee. There's a case that your wife may not be on board with the new changes, and she may be too far gone. You may have waited too long to pull your shit together, and she may not even want to be in this relationship. So a main event is not a guaranteed thing to happen, but if it does happen, and that's a good thing, you have to understand why it's there. And then a little nod here, because a lot of guys hate when there's not certainty with any of this sexual strategy. It's just heuristics. So I always goof around, call it a bubble-wrapped life, and that's when you use metaphor in the language, I enjoy it because it gives guys a way to visualize what we're talking about. Because you know what bubble wrapping stuff does. It makes it perfectly safe. You can throw it around, treat it like crap. Life doesn't work like that. You can't smash a relationship around for half an hour and expect to bubble wrap it with a couple simple tips and tricks. So it also hints to that none of this is a shortcut. If anybody tells you in relationships or pickup or any of those spaces, if there's a shortcut, a tip, or a trick, they're lying to you, flat out lying to you. And this is my way of acknowledging that. Second thing there, and it's a little bit of in jokes. When I was in the military, everything was taught to the lowest common denominator. I always found that very frustrating because if anybody was half-ass smart and knew what he was doing, he was essentially being stalled, waiting for the guy who couldn't even, handle putting on his clothes in the morning and ironing his stuff. You had to basically learn things at his level, which is a very frustrating experience for people. And so it kind of morphed over my Reddit days where I talked about not eating paint and how I don't eat paint warnings in my stuff. If a guy's going to screw up the understanding, well, there's nothing I can do to fix that. He's going to screw up regardless because he's too stupid to see it. So for a lot of the old guard there, they kind of see it where I'm giving these don't eat paint warnings and like, oh yeah, I remember that. So it was a nice little funny joke, and it's a good way to build rapport with the audience. So now it's kind of one of those things that I get known for. So when I give don't eat paint warnings, it's like Carl doing his rants. It gives you guys a little bit of familiarity. And that's what is kind of a meta. I'm going to pause it here because there's one more thing I want to talk about. It gives you a little meta thing. Same as every time I put on a video, if I have a don't eat paint warning, you kind of get that, oh, that little bit of nostalgic feeling. Oh yeah, it's like his videos. It makes things comfortable. It makes things predictable, regular. And it's really a good technique for not just building an audience, but building rapport with women. If you have certain predictable aspects to your personality, it's going to be something that gives them comfort. And you can pull those away to be unpredictable purposefully, or you can keep them there for comfort. Either one works well. But you'll see now, I'll have that same warning on every cooking video now. So there's 20 cooking videos, completely disparate, different choices in tone, different choices in content, different choices in shots, but there's always that one thing tying them together. And then this part after, I wanted something for the end cards. This is just me viewing my home version of this one, so there's not going to be any end cards here, but you need 22 seconds. And I thought, what better use could I have than just throwing a little bit of a signature on there? It kind of shows that, yes, I've tried these things. Yes, they've worked. I'm putting my, and again, I'm not an authority on this. All right, we're not going to loop it anyway. I'm not an authority on this, but at the same time, it's not just me taking the Rational Mail and reading it verbatim, driving my Honda Civic around a parking lot, or playing some video game footage while I'm making up a bunch of crap. Like, no, I'm putting my name behind this thing for as much as it's worth. And as we get bigger and more popular, and as we start to change more lives, that may become a thing where this name actually holds some weight. But for now, it's just me providing the best amount of credibility I can give to the advice I give that I can. And all I can say on that, and it's done through this signature, is look, I've done it myself. This is my actual signature, my real signature, scanned, put into the thing there. So take it for what you want. I'm not just mentally masturbating. So on that note, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you guys think. This first one is going to be strictly for you Patreon guys only. And if you kind of like me doing these behind the scenes director's commentary thing, maybe mapping the way I do these videos to sexual strategy and giving you guys some nice mental models to help you, feel free, throw some comments in the chat, let me know, and I can keep these ones coming. Anyways, peace guys. Take care.